So this video is basically about how I am suspected to have COVID long hauler syndrome. And I say suspected because by the time I got a COVID blood test to check for secondary antibodies, it was about almost a year after the fact, after I first started feeling sick. So I cannot say for sure whether or not I had COVID last year in 2020, but a lot of evidence does suggest it, and my doctor couldn't come up with any other explanation. And I've had a pretty extensive rule out. So that's what I'll open with. And for people who don't really believe in the pandemic or don't believe my story, it's tiring to defend myself and defend why I think I had COVID. So I won't even try. I will just tell my story. And hopefully maybe for someone who may not have had COVID formally diagnosed in a timely fashion in, blood work and substantiated evidence, but suspects they may have had COVID at one stage and may have the long hauler syndrome, this is a video for you. So in January 2020, I thought I had mumps. And by that, I should say the hospital thought I had mumps, told me they were pretty much sure I had mumps, and discharged me from the hospital with a face mask and gave me only one blood test, and it was for mumps. Because I had a sore throat, very badly swollen tonsils. I had a fever, I think it was about 101, may have gotten to 102, and my lymph nodes in my cheeks around my neck were all swollen, especially on one side, and the sort of unilateral swelling on the right side made them think it's a mumps face. Classic mumps face, get her out of here. But the trouble with that was I have had the mumps vaccine as a kid, and I told them that. They said, well, you can get it anyway. I thought, if you say so, where would I have gotten mumps? It's a bit more rare these days, especially in my area, so it didn't really make sense, but they sent me home. I didn't feel like I should be home. I felt, the cough was unlike other coughs. It hurt disproportionately, especially with the facial swelling. And I did feel like I started to get trouble getting air in. I felt profoundly tired. I don't remember much about that time because instead of being at my apartment, I figured I need to be at my parents' house, isolated in their basement, because I didn't want to be by myself. But I also couldn't really take care of myself. So even though they needed to be far, far away from me, they would, put face coverings on and bring me things. And obviously this is before COVID is particularly on the American scene and in the public consciousness. And also at that point, that was before it had a pandemic status. So whether or not I came down with COVID in January is highly debatable because it would have been kind of rare. But they have found that in Red Cross blood samples donated as far back as, I believe, November of 2019, COVID was in people's blood and in, antibodies for it. So people had already had it, recovered from it, had the convalescent antibodies in their blood by November of 2019. So yes, it would have been rare. It's not hellishly likely, but given what happened after, again, there are very limited explanations as to what happened. So February, I had been working night shifts for 3 years, 12 hours upwards at like the top end, 10 to 12 hours between about 9 p.m. and 9 in the morning at the latest, going home at 9. And I was okay with it. I didn't mind it. I had been pretty physically fit. I had a gym membership with our apartment's gym. I'm just trying to paint a picture. I was active. I'd been healthier than I had been in prior years. I've always had bad luck with getting certain flus and certain viruses. Fifth disease, also known as parvovirus B19, that hit me really hard when I was 24. Hand, foot, and mouth disease hit me really hard when I was 26. And I did get a Guillain-Barré syndrome thought to have happened with fifth disease where I was wheelchair bound. So I've not had the very best luck with viruses. I am immunocompromised, but that had somewhat resolved at the time that I caught whatever I caught. Mumps, COVID, who knows? It was not mumps. The blood work came back. It wasn't mumps. They had no idea what to say to me. But I recovered from the flu-like symptoms. The facial edema stayed for months. But then I noticed way more disturbing symptoms with trouble catching my breath, I couldn't do exertion at work. I found myself basically not doing my job. I could only sit on the couch, and I kept wondering why it's taking me a full 30 minutes to catch my breath after doing something simple like changing someone or, tending to something. Just walking around the property, which isn't a very big property, going up a staircase, things got worse and worse, and I noticed changes in my blood pressure. I had never had to worry about my blood pressure before. I had never had blood pressure problems. All of a sudden, I was having very, very badly low pulse pressure, like less than a 20-point difference between the systolic and the diastolic reading. And I was having this weird isolated diastolic hypertension. And the diastolic reading measures the pressure in between the blood vessels. So for some reason, these blood vessels were constricting badly and restricting blood flow to my head and my body. And that was just getting worse and worse. So within about a week in February, I had to formally resign from the night shift. And at the time, my doctor was thinking, well, you've overdone it with the nights. Maybe that has thrown off your diurnal rhythms and you're losing sleep and your body can't catch up and your blood pressure's all, crazy. So he thought that, the best solution would be to switch to a day shift, which I tried. I felt even sicker. Everything was not working. Even limiting my shifts to like 4 hours at a time wasn't working. And meanwhile, I was having the worst problems even staying conscious. I had coworkers concerned enough to want to call an ambulance for me because my lips would be turning blue and I would have to put my head down, between my knees to try to not lose consciousness. And the attack wouldn't resolve even after sitting for a long period of time. So it became quite clear by March of that year, I'm not really fit to work whatsoever. I couldn't even pick up a night shift or a day shift here and there. I tried to change to a substitute team position where you just sign up for a shift, the night before you figure you're okay to work. And even that couldn't work. So I was going to my doctor. I was going to the hospital even because these bouts would scare the living crap out of me and my family. I would lose circulation to my feet. My feet would go blue. I couldn't feel my legs at several points. They would have me close my eyes and they would needle poke me and I couldn't feel it. It felt like my lower body was getting submerged in cold water. So I wound up in the hospital several times, but again, with enough lying down, the problem would resolve. But the moment I start to try to do anything, the problem comes back. So they were putting me through a bunch of very rigorous tests with my heart and my brain. I was in a head CT, I had a brain MRI, I had an EKG, I had chest x-rays, see if I had pneumonia, this and that. Everything was coming back normal. I was having the worst headaches of my life. They thought I had meningitis several times because of the stiffness of my neck, my light sensitivity, and the fact that these migraines were so severe I couldn't sleep through them even. I couldn't just get in a dark room and make them stop. I would just hold my head screaming pretty much. My mom would have to take me to urgent care and then they wouldn't know. They tried all sorts of medicines for the migraines and nothing helped. The migraines would last up to 4 days. And after an attack, I just felt more drained than I've ever felt in my life. The insomnia was terrible because you couldn't sleep with these migraines. So I was dead tired, but had the worst insomnia. That's still not particularly resolved. They tried all these different migraine medicines, different classes of medicines, different treatments. Nothing was working. But everything related to my heart was coming out fine. The blood pressure was troubling to them, but they couldn't explain it. There wasn't an issue with my heart. They sent me to cardiology in either February or March of 2020. And the cardiologist put me in a Holter monitor. I ended up having to do 2 different rounds of Holter monitor and 1 stress test on a treadmill, which I pretty well flunked. My body I couldn't catch my breath with minimal stress and exertion, whereas before I could easily jog or walk. And yeah, it was terrible. The stress test made me feel like I was dying, and they didn't know what to make of it though, because my vitals didn't go that haywire, but my heart definitely was in the tachycardic phase with little effort. but it was within the realm of, I guess, my age. They were like, okay, you're definitely not the fittest for 29, but if this is what you would like jogging before, it's not the worst. I'm like, this is not what I was like before. The Holter tests showed nothing except bouts of tachycardia. And the cardiologist had no idea. She suspected adrenal fatigue, which is not really a real or respected diagnosis, even though you can look at adrenal hormone levels and see if there is an issue. Adrenal fatigue is considered like a naturopathic condition, which is treated naturopathically with like special things and teas and lifestyle changes and Zen and Qi. And it's like, no, that was not it. I had a full adrenal workup. Nothing was standing out, not, cortisol levels. Adrenocorticotropic hormone was pretty high, but again, I have PCOS, so that wasn't really it. Didn't explain very much. The Holter test with the bouts of tachycardia, they started leaning towards mental issues. They thought I had panic disorders. But when you wear a Holter monitor, generally what they'll tell you to do is when you're having an episode where you're having trouble breathing, you click the little thing that comes with it. And you write down in your diary the time and when you clicked and what you were doing at the time. And nothing I was saying was correlating with these tachycardic incidents. They thought, oh, you must have been panicking or something must have made you stressed or emotional. I'm like, no, I could be sitting watching TV and I'll lose my breath. Just the breath won't come. I feel like I can't get air in. And then something minimal like slowly going up a staircase or taking the trash out. Lifting anything was a no. And I previously had been able to lift at least 100 pounds in the form of a person yelling at me. It didn't make sense. They wanted me to try things like Paxil or, just basically medicines for mood disorders or a panic disorder. I flat out refused that, and people were angry at the time, like, you're refusing treatment. But I have never had a genuine panic attack. I actually had to change clothes. I was feeling sweaty and gross, and my temperature was up a degree. It's kind of life. But as I was saying, I've never had a genuine panic attack. So yes, I did refuse the medicines. I just didn't think they were right. I really didn't think they were right, especially because of the way things progressed so quickly and didn't seem to at all correlate with where I was at in my headspace. I was in the middle of a pharmacy degree. I was very driven to work in medicine. I was excited. I felt like it was my path. So it wasn't the person I wanted to be. And I was still just like, compartmentalizing the stress of doing the degree and working. That just really wasn't it. So I had the Paxil doctor lady saying, you need to quit one or the other, the job or the degree, because I can tell you that's the reason. But it turned out it was not the reason, because long after quitting that job and finishing that degree in my own time, basically in my bed, the only panic attack I ever had may have been taking the actual licensing exam, but I still got through it, and it wasn't that. So after everything was done, I basically wasn't working, wasn't in school, and even then, the stress of existing was too much on my body, and the fever was still hanging out. So during the summertime in 2020, that was when the fever was at its worst, and it would cap at 103. But they could not figure out why. My white cell count was a bit elevated, but they couldn't locate an infection anywhere in my body. I'd subsequently had to undergo a full body CT, and there was no cancer, there was no abscess anywhere. They suspected there must be one somewhere, not obvious, but it was not that either. I've seen a rheumatologist that ruled out things like arthritis and lupus, and it's like House MD, it's never lupus. But no, it wasn't. I do have an autoimmune disease, but it's not the type of thing that causes a fever. It's a mucous membrane disorder. It's a dermatological problem. It's not that. So the fever could only be explained by a condition known as hypothalamic dysregulation, which actually has happened to many COVID long haulers. They keep spiking a fever long after they recover from the acute phase of the virus. And it wasn't until I started watching documentaries that describe the experiences of COVID long haulers that I started wondering if that's what I had. And I do factor in that a lot of people watch those documentaries, and a lot of those symptoms are so non-specific that they could be caused by all sorts of things, especially a long-term sequelae to things like hepatitis or Lyme disease or this and that. A lot of things can cause the same symptoms as COVID long hauler syndrome. But it was the fact that for me, all of this started with that fever, the lymph swelling, being kicked out of the hospital with suspected mumps, them just wanting me out of medical practice because it was in their consciousness and on their radar screen that COVID-19 could be in the States by then. It just wasn't pretty much available knowledge to the public. So there is that. My family does wonder if I did have COVID and they were taking care of me, why they didn't get sick. Well, they may have been asymptomatic. My father may have had a mild case. He vaguely recalls feeling puny at the time, but he has type O blood, which is apparently the least susceptible blood type to COVID. I have B positive. But I've always been kind of sickly, especially when I get sick. I stay sickly for a long time. I'm wearing the perfect t-shirt for this vibe, by the way. But I have been through every kind of test, and it wasn't until I started having friends that did have COVID confirmed and did get confirmed long hauler syndrome that we were basically comparing notes. And I was trying really hard not to lead the witness. I didn't say anything like, hey, my doctor suspects I had COVID long hauler syndrome. I just asked them what they're going through. And one thing that leapt off the page, besides the obvious, I can never catch my breath, I can never sleep enough, these migraines are killing me, I can't get through a single day without collapsing physically or emotionally or this or that, insomnia. One thing that really stood out to me besides all that was one friend that said they have been having a daily fever, especially when they get tired, worn down, or even a nightly fever that lasts all night, and they have terrible, dreadful night sweats, and their doctor can't explain it, and they've been through every single damn test under the sun. Basically the same kind of workup I had, where their whole body is scanned, all the blood work under the sun gets done, STDs, HIV, pathogens, parasites, everything you can think of, and it's all come back normal. And then the only thing that they've ended up with is a nervous system dysregulation diagnosis. It's called autonomic nervous system dysfunction. And that is the only diagnosis that I've gotten besides chronic fatigue syndrome and ME. So again, that's just my horrible experience. But it's about a year on, assuming that whatever happened to me happened last January or February, if I did have COVID then. And obviously, you can get COVID again. You can get these new, more virulent strains, the mutated strains. I'm not a candidate for the vaccine due to the autoimmune disease, but if they find a way I can safely take it, I would still get the 2 vaccine series, because just because I had it doesn't mean the antibodies stay, clearly, because they don't. So you can get it again. You still need to get the vaccine. You still need to wear a mask. We all have to continue being adults. But my life has drastically changed again. And I've not been able to do anything, really. No. A single day, a day-to-day is hard. The things that are just basically, if you're a stay-at-home wife, girl, person, servant, I can still barely do even that. So I just don't know what to say. And neither does my doctor. I am told I qualify for disability, but good luck getting it.